Mark Schwemmer's got a story over in Landline today. When it comes to compliance with regulations, truck drivers are often the focus. But what can a trucker do if a trucking company, broker, or ELD provider is failing to follow the rules? There's good news. That's where the National Consumer Complaint Database comes in. The NCCD comes in. It's according to a new story from our friend Mark Schwemmer, the senior editor over there at Landline. And the good news is that the website has recently been updated with the intention of providing truckers a reliable platform to let people know who's giving them the business, who's out there sticking it to them. By the way, speaking to people who are standing up to the stick it to thems, we are actually welcoming Bryce Mongeon here. He is the Director of Legislative Affairs over at OOIDA. You can find them over on the Book of Face, the Tweets of Twit, the Tube of You, and the Gram of Insta, either at OOIDA, straight up OOIDA, or on YouTube and Instagram at Truckers OOIDA, one word, or OOIDA, underline truckers. Welcome, Bryce. Good to have you back, my friend. What's the good word?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. As you kind of already started saying here, we've been keeping very busy over the past few weeks.
Yeah, and by the way, there is a bill out there right now that I want to kind of talk about, because I really think that in many ways there's a lot of people who think this is the heart of the matter of one of the things that is really skewering the rates at which truckers get paid. Predatory lease purchase agreements. I don't think people, even people who are making a good living, realize how much their bottom lines are being affected by the undercutting that is going on because of what the lease purchase agreements, predatory ones at least, seem to kind of suggest. Can you dig into that for me, my friend?
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to. So predatory truck leasing. When we're talking to folks on Capitol Hill about this, we kind of compare it to indentured servitude in a way, or kind of when you're trapped in a deal with the company store. We make clear we're not talking about your traditional owner-operator relationships where you own your truck, or you've got a loan through somewhere else and you're financing your truck. We're talking about these deals where you're working for a carrier and that same carrier owns a truck and you're paying that carrier to operate for the privilege of operating that truck. And Congress, we convinced them to look more closely into this issue as part of the last highway bill. There's a task force that examined these predatory lease agreements, and what they found is basically what we already knew, which is that these are never a good deal for truckers. They used some really strong language when talking about this. They called them, irredeemable tools of fraud, a threat to the safety, highway safety. So, we were very pleased to see those findings, and now we have some legislation that would implement the top recommendation of that legislation, which is to ban the use of these types of agreements.
I was explaining this, by the way, Bryce, to a friend of mine who works in the film industry. He's an associate producer on a television show, and he said, an associate producer on a television show means you're a writer. And I said, I want you to imagine that you got your dream gig that you've always wanted to write for a TV show, and when you got there, they paid you a salary, but then they said your salary goes to renting the office you work in. And that and that at some point you would own that office, but that they reserved the right at the end to take the office away from you right before you made the final payment. And when I explained it that way, he was like, oh, he said, no, you're kidding. I said, go back and read what it is. And that's essentially what it is. You are being basically charged to, like, we're paying you, and then that money goes right back to us so we can pay for your office. That's it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like that. And it is worse in some ways too, because not only, maybe you think, well, I'll just work harder, do more, and I'll make sure, they're not going to get me. I'll make those payments. But in these arrangements, when you're leased to a carrier, you're dependent on them for getting work and operating under their authority. So, oftentimes, very often, the work has a way of drying up when you're coming up on the end of a lease agreement. So there's no way to earn enough money to pay those obligations. So the deck and these contracts are just completely stacked against drivers. So you're right, it is like that, but it's even worse, and it's crazy that people are able to get away with this kind of stuff.
Oh, you made me think about the analogy can be taken even further. So you work for this show and you write scripts for this show, but right before you're ready to pay off for the show, the only time we pay you is when you write a script for this show. Oh no, we don't need a script for this show this week, but how am I going to make my payment? Yep. Too bad, so sad. And what they're doing is the other thing, the way to think about this, and I want people out there who think a lot of these men and women are suckers, because you hit the nail on the head. The idea that you get people who are like, I'll just get ahead. I'll just start asking for more work. They know exactly how much work they're giving you. They are dripping people out. What they're doing is they're creating an independent driver who is actually not independent, which means they're creating somebody who is not an employee, but essentially is giving them free. It's slavery. Let's be honest. Let's call it what it is. It's slavery. It is indentured servitude is what it is, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And it gets back to bringing it back to what you said at the beginning. This is just one of the factors that's driving down rates across the industry and driving down working conditions for all drivers, because it gets back to what's the cheapest labor, what's the cheapest butt we can get in a seat, and how can we keep it that way. And as long as there's people who can keep getting away with this kind of stuff, is going to drive down rates and drive down the working conditions for everybody else.
All right, so let's talk about the particulars. So, like I said, bill would protect truckers from predatory lease purchase agreements. How does the bill work? That's what it comes down to. How is it structured? How is it written? And what is the enforcement mechanism?
Yes, and so what it would do is, and again, I think this is the important part, is it defines what's a predatory commercial vehicle lease purchase agreement. And so we're differentiating it from your typical lease agreement, so it defines predatory as where the carrier is controlling the work, and basically, the motor carrier has control of the operations, the finances, and so many other aspects of the operation that, as you touched on before, it's hard to differentiate how much independence does this driver really have. That's one component of it. The other important component is that it has to be a lease where the driver is leasing the truck from the motor carrier. So it's kind of two parts you need to look at. It's, is it one of these agreements where you're leasing a truck from a motor carrier, where you're basically giving that money right back to the same motor carrier? And is it one of these agreements where you really don't have a whole lot of control, if any at all, over the work you're doing, how you're going to structure your business, tax, finance practices, all that sort of stuff. So it's written in a way that it's very much based on the recommendations and findings from that truck leasing task force, and it's written in a way that we are making sure this is not going to ensnare anyone who's in a legitimate lease with a carrier. And it would require US DOT to put forward regulations that, again, prohibits the use of these agreements between motor carriers and owner operators.
The other thing is, too, I want to make this really clear, is that a lot of these things are set up in a way, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Bryce, are set up in a way, let's just say that the person who's actually doing the gig comes into some money and suddenly is like, oh, okay, but I can pay this off right now. They figure out ways where you can't pay it off. They literally often figure out these routes in which they actually prevent you from being, well, no, your contract says it can't be done like that. I mean, they figure out ways where it becomes almost a Kobayashi Maru, a no-win scenario, as Star Trek calls it, where you literally are in a position where there is no way you solve the problem. That's another thing to look for when you're signing these things. Is there no way that you can ever just go into an office and say, hey, my great aunt died and left me enough money to buy this truck right now? They'd still find a way to tell you no, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's correct. It's that. And there's also some of the agreements that we've seen and have been shared with us is that these carriers will present it as, hey, we're going to do you a big favor, help you get set up and operating. We'll take care of all this paperwork. But when you read the fine print, then they also have control over your LLC, your registrations. And when you default, or when, like you described, they find some other way to basically yank the lease or yank the truck away from you, all of that other stuff can go away too. So whatever business you've allegedly set up or they've helped you set up can go away, which again hurts your credit, hurts your ability to do business in the future. So there's just so many bad provisions and ways they can put the screws to you, just like you said.
Okay, so I always ask this question to you guys because, as I've always found out from you guys, there's always more work to be done. Let's say that the bill, and by the way, the bill ain't going to pass tomorrow. I mean, we've all watched enough Schoolhouse Rock, at least, to know that's not how this works. But let's say the bill passes tomorrow. What work is to be? This isn't like hallelujah, praise the Lord. What work has to be
Hmm.
done after this? Even if all the particulars of the bill as it is survive, or you guys get a couple of other things in there that really kind of
Hmm.
strengthen and give this teeth, what remains to be done? I don't want people to think, hey, one and done. What's
Yep.
going on here?
Yeah, and so this is kind of a good, I guess, point to talk how some of this stuff usually works, where you're talking about changes. The bill itself directs the U.S. Department of Transportation to put together regulations to implement the requirements of this bill, and that's something that Congress often does. Instead of specifying every single last detail of what has to be done, they give a pretty good framework to the agencies and say, all right, put the regulations in place, get all the fine details together, put in place the enforcement mechanism. So if this were to be enacted, the bill requires U.S. DOT to issue these regulations within 1 year. So there would still be an opportunity for, comment, things like that, to refine some of the details of this. So you're right. It's not something that the day after it's enacted, this will go away. It would take a little bit more time for the department to put all the procedures in place. But that's very common for any time Congress wants to implement policy.
And it's one of those things too. We talk about this on this segment all the time. The idea of the active citizen, the driver citizen. This is one of those things that if this bill people should start thinking about this now. People should read this bill now, really dive in deep, talk to you guys about what this bill represents, and then kind of gear themselves up for the comment period, for the specifics of all of this stuff. That's the real kind of game here. The game is to kind of figure out if this bill passes, then there becomes a process by which there's a comment period and a lot of input from a lot of different parties, a lot of different stakeholders, maybe some bad actors as well, trying to get their voices in there to kind of, soften the blow that might hit them, and is to really kind of be ready to think about what you wanted to do. And you've pointed this out as well, and I want to kind of come back to it. Even if you're not in a position where you've been doing this a long time, you're an owner operator, or you're somebody that works for a carrier and understands that you're not going to fall prey to one of these things, it's still important because, as we've both pointed out, you need to be involved in this because the overall rates, if in fact we can end this scourge, you would see a genuine uptick in rates, because it would mean that less and less companies are out there really gutting rates from below with these lease purchase agreements, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you absolutely, you're correct. And I think as you're talking about that, it made me think of something else, because we've been thinking through our advocacy efforts on this. How do we get more lawmakers to co-sponsor this legislation? This is certainly an issue where we believe if there's someone who has been taken advantage of by one of these leases, that is a prime opportunity to talk to your representative and share your story and try and get them to sign on the bill. I think, compared to an issue like truck parking, where every trucker's experienced this, it's kind of a very broad base of people who experienced it, but maybe not quite as bad. When you've been affected by this, you're going to be very negatively affected. So we think there's strong stories to share there. But as you just mentioned, anyone can talk about this because it is important for rates and for truckers across the industry, because in some ways it's, what you're able to get for your work is only going to be as good, or it's certainly going to be affected by whatever the lowest rate is out there. So even if you haven't been directly affected by this, being able to share with your representative that this is important for truckers across the board is a really powerful message too, because you can help connect those dots and, let them know that it's not just the folks not helping protect folks from getting taken advantage of, but it's going to help the industry and help truckers as a whole.
Talk to me a little bit about the people behind the bill. Talk to me about who, who's actually the driving force behind this bill, and who folks can get behind, and who folks can get behind who are not yet behind, who you guys are hoping might jump in and be a part of what is moving now.
Yes, and so it's Congresswoman Julia Brownley, a Democrat from California, who has taken the lead on this. And very importantly, she serves on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So this is part of our broader effort to have this legislation included in the upcoming highway bill. So right now, Congress, and especially the House, House Transportation, or T&I Committee, is putting together that bill. So we call this to kind of be a marker bill. So by having this introduced, we are trying to build support and show the committee that, hey, there is enough support for this legislation to include it in that larger legislative package. So right now, anybody who we can get on board is critically important. I would say especially If you're represented by a Republican member of Congress, we're working to get Republicans on the legislation. We absolutely don't think this is a partisan issue, and I think that's something that truckers understand. So presenting it in a way that is, nonpartisan, bipartisan, however you want to talk about it, is going to be really important. Because again, I think, this is speaking in generalities, but if you start talking about consumer protections or, trying to protect, people from bad contracts, things like that, at first glance, Republicans might not be as supportive, but it's really important to explain the whole message on this because it goes beyond kind of your typical consumer protection issue. These are really just tools of fraud. It's straight up fraud in a lot of cases here. So explaining to lawmakers, especially Republicans, that this is something important that they should be getting behind.
Well, and there's also, I think, the other what I would call pressure from both points, pressure from consumer protection advocates, but also pressure from the administration, because there's a lot of noise coming out of the DOT in regard to some of the things that Secretary Duffy has said recently that I would make the argument that emotionally and spiritually seem to lend themselves to this sort of stance as well, too. By the way, Julia Brownlee, a Democrat of California, introduced the Predatory Truck Leasing Prevention Act of 2025. She did it on Wednesday the 17th. It's H.R. 5423, and it would prevent and prohibit motor carriers from using predatory commercial motor vehicle lease purchase programs. Full stop. And like I said, and like Bryce said, particularly if you have a Republican member of Congress who you actually have any sort of access to, just reach out and say, hey, now you don't want to put a little too much pressure on you, but take a hard look at HR 5423. You'd be helping out a lot of people in the industry and not just the ones directly affected by it. All right, let's have a little bit of fun here. Guilty by Association Truck Show. Give us a little preview of what people can expect. What's going on, Bryce?
Yes, well, we've got all sorts of great stuff going on there. It's just, registration, and the show just kicked off yesterday, so it runs through Saturday. One of the highlights and things we're excited about, I know maybe this isn't what everyone else shows up for, but tomorrow at 10:30 a.m., FMCSA will be hosting a town hall, a question and answer format event. So we're looking forward to the opportunity for truckers to engage directly with FMCSA. They've been to this event in the past, and I think I know you mentioned the secretary before. I think the Department of Transportation and especially FMCSA has really been listening to truckers for once. It's a very welcome change. We're seeing a lot of different initiatives announced. So we're looking forward to that and looking forward to attendees having the opportunity to talk with FMCSA tomorrow. And throughout the rest of the weekend, there's concerts going on, truck parades, everything else. So I know I've been able to attend in previous years, not able to attend this year, but it was always it was a good opportunity to meet with truckers, talk with them, and hear directly from them. So I know that I've really enjoyed the opportunity to attend in the past.
Couple of quick things, by the way, and all of those are available, by the way, on podcast platforms. There have been a number of Trucking with OOIDA podcasts that have focused on this with Brian Bossman Martin of 4 State Trucks, who has actually gotten a lot of chances to talk with Ashley and Scott, has said things like, but the turnout, the enthusiasm, the quantity and caliber of trucks, the money raised for Special Olympics, just everybody's general desire to be here and mix it up with other truckers was fabulous. Not only is there a ton of fun to be had, but the industry rallies for Special Olympics as we execute our version of the world's largest convoy. And, we talk a lot about this with our friend Dean Croak, our friend Starduster, who is involved with a convoy that raises money. He, by the way, this trucker, owner-operator, actually raises about $12,000 every year for Special Olympics. It's an important issue. It's an important issue because it gives purpose, life, and meaning to a lot of people who, often don't have outlets, who often don't have the kind of access to the sort of fun, camaraderie, community, and triumph that goes with being an athlete. It's a great organization, right?
Yes, absolutely. I know that's something that we're very happy and excited to be able to support, and something that we're very proud of. Yes.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, because I'm going to actually have to call your friend and mine, Mr. Pugh, today about this. like I said, there's all kinds of great stuff. There's both fun and information that OOIDA is cooking up these days. The Truck to Success, the registration
Mm-hmm.
ends on October 1st. Tell people why they should get registered, because I got a case to make as well, too. But go ahead.
Yeah, I made sure that I virtually zoomed into Truck to Success previously because I wanted to see everything that we had to offer with this, and it really is incredible. Just the breadth and depth of information that is covered during this. I've been with OOIDA now for a few years, so I have some more experience and understanding of the industry, not firsthand, but just attending that really gives you a good sense of everything that is out there before you jump into the world of being an owner operator. I think one of the things that always stuck with me when folks from our foundation or Louis will talk about this is, some people at the end, they're ready to go. And some people at the end, the most valuable thing that they've learned is I'm not ready for this, or maybe this isn't the right path for me to take. So, and that's not to say they're getting out of the industry or anything, but it's so helpful in, understanding all the parts that go into to starting up as an owner operator, understanding where the pitfalls may be. So I think it's just an incredible opportunity. It's an incredibly well-run program, and just the information there. There's just so much that we have to offer on that.
And by the way, I told you I'd have a couple of comments. I actually, except for those moments I was on the air, got a chance to go last year and got a chance
Mm-hmm.
to see a lot of the events as well. And one of my takeaways, and Louis talked about this with me too, is I would say, and there's a lot of subsets under these three major groups. There's three reasons to go. First of all, you're thinking about it, and you're thinking about it long and
Mm-hmm.
hard, but you're not quite over the fence yet. And I'll get to that in a second with one of the comments that was made on our chat room. If you're thinking about it and don't know which way you're going to go, it's a good program. If you're actually going to make the leap, you've made the decision, and you need to know where the best place is to start, it's a great thing to do. The final group, which there were a number of people there who fell into this category, and I'm really encouraging people, is you're already there and things are
Mm-hmm.
going okay, but you'd like to get a little better at the ins and the outs and the day-to-day of actually being your own boss. Really, genuinely, you want to, I call it people who want to seal the deal, that
Mm-hmm.
it is not dumbed down information. It's comprehensive. It is good for the beginner. It is good for the person who's setting one up, and it is great for somebody who is already there and looking to get expertise from people who know of what they speak. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm always just impressed by the offerings that we have at OOIDA, and just I think the thing that's important to understand too is that the people who work for us at our headquarters, they have trucking industry experience too. Obviously, Louis has over 20 years of experience, but the folks who work in our compliance department, folks who work in our business services department, they have real life on the road experience or have family who's in the industry. So it's just an incredible wealth of knowledge. And like you said, it benefits everyone across the spectrum, whether you're just thinking about it or whether you think things are going well. There's something for everybody to learn there.
One of the other funny things that Louis actually made, I mean, I literally laughed out loud during one of his segments where somebody asked the question, when should you inform your previous employer that you're doing this? And Louis said, yeah, you should call them from the parking lot of the next place you're going to work. And literally the room
Yeah.
fell over. And I got to tell you, there were some people who looked around. He goes, I know. He said, there are exceptions. There are people you work for who are good to you, who have been family to you.
Yeah.
You handle that the way you want to handle it. He said, but remember, the same people who will cut you loose in 2 seconds are only owed you driving into the lot of the next place you're going to work and saying, oh, hey, I've taken another job. Well, when are you going to start? Oh, I'm going to go get my orders right now. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. And something else I
Yeah.
wanted to point out, too, we actually have somebody on the chat. Bruce Almighty said, I did the lease program with Prime when I first started out in 2020. I got away from that lease in about 4 months. I was too new in the business and felt I was not ready. This is a really good kind of distinction here. Do you notice, though, guys, that Bruce actually could walk away? That's the other thing, too, that Bruce actually has the ability to walk away. A lot of predatory lease agreements, let's make this really clear, trap you as well, don't they? That's the other thing we
Yeah.
didn't talk about.
Mhm.
You're trapped. You're in,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really important point. And, that was one of the things that we'll see as the discussions on this bill go on. There's companies that use lease purchase programs, and they'll say, they're an important tool for them. One of the findings from Truck Leasing Task Force was no one came to them with any evidence that showed these ever worked out. With all that said, that's an important part of I mentioned that rulemaking process. There'll be input from both people, from businesses who maybe use lease purchase agreements, and from folks who have been burned by them. And that's where you can kind of get into that nitty gritty and really make clear. On this point, for example, one of the things that makes it clear you're trapped in a predatory agreement is when you have no way out. So I think that's a good point to highlight, that there will be, there's going to be some fine tuning on this. Obviously, the devil is always going to be in the details, so we want to watch out for any of those agreements where it's really trapping folks. But, we expect more of those kind of questions and discussions to come up as this bill moves forward.
Am I having a Mandela effect here? I remember there was a story about this one woman who actually made one of these programs actually work for her, and then at the end basically said, yeah, it worked for me. Nobody else should do this. This is a nightmare. I think there was one story where she actually was able to she did it. She purchased it. And I think it's because she was she was the one customer that complained enough, like the person who gets enough claim denials from an insurance company and basically got it. But it's because they just thought this is going to be a nightmare if we don't get rid of this woman. And she basically got the truck, but she said no one should ever have to do this. This never works out. And I am the absolute exception. Remember that story?
It sounds right to me. Either that is true, or you've also just planted, retroactively planted that memory in my mind too. But I think that is true. That does sound right to me. Yes.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Bryce, I got to tell you, it always goes by too fast. Thank you so much for making time for us, brother. It is good to have you, and we will talk with you soon. Thank you, man.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good to chat with you too.